everyone, it's Shari Carroll here for SimonsSaysStamp.com with a couple techniques on my card using the Faber Castell gelatos. I'm starting off with a Tim Holtz stamp from the Just Thoughts selection, and this one says, "Life is the art of drawing without an eraser," and I really like this whole imagery and words set together. So I'm going to start off by inking this up with some archival black ink. I'll be watercoloring this image once I have it stamped, so the archival ink really sets into the paper and becomes permanent, and it's one of my absolute favorite inks for doing watercolor. So I'm making sure I have that perfectly inked to make sure I have all that great detail. And I'm using the Tim Holtz watercolor paper, and I'm using the smooth side of the paper to do my stamping. So I'll go ahead and place that right in the center and give it a good push. And I'm using my stamp press here to make sure I can really push into the center of that image. So once I'm done giving that some CPR, I'll go ahead and lift up my stamp press, and here is my image. And I'm in a hurry always, or just impatient, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my heat tool and just go ahead and heat set this, but you could let it air dry. So I would give it a little bit of time, 10 minutes or so, to let that ink really set in. Now I'm ready to start my coloring, and I have one of the Faber Castell gelatos, and I have some freezer paper here, and this is the shiny side, and I'll go ahead and scribble on my gelatos right onto that freezer paper. This will act as my color palette. So I'm using a water brush by Tim Holtz. There's also a water brush that's pretty much the same from Faber Castell. So I'm just going to pick up some of that color and start painting into my image. I do like to start with light colors first. So here I have this light blue, and I'm just picking up the color and filling in my little building. And I can go back in and intensify the color on top of that to create some shadows. I've added the mango gelato to my palette, and I'll be using this to add some shadowing and color to the left side of my building. I always love a turquoise and orange color sitting next to each other, and these blend really well, and the in-between color becomes brown. So from here I'll just keep painting and filling in. One of the really fun things about this image is that the letters are open, so you can go ahead and paint those in. So I'm going in with my brown and just doing a base coat with a really light color or washed out color of the brown. When I'm painting, I like to turn my paper so that I get a nice smooth direction, and I wanted to show you how I like to add darker color, and that's just by grabbing some more paint and just kind of dotting it on in the areas that I want it darker. I have most of my painting done, and so here I'm using the Pitt Artist Pen, and this is a gray color, and I'll just be kind of scribbling this on. And what I love about these art pens is that you can pull that color a little bit to lighten it up. So I'm just adding a shadow on the bottom of all of my imagery and just using my finger to pull that away. These pens are an NDA ink, so you have a little bit of time to go ahead and move that color, but once they dry they become permanent, and you can still go ahead and watercolor over them. Now I'm going in with a green Pitt pen, stamper brush pen, and I'm just intensifying the green in some of my lettering, and again I'm just adding a little bit of color and moving it with my finger. And I don't want a really perfect look, so I'm okay if it smears outside of the lines. So just a little dot of color and then moving it once again with my finger. And now I'm using the brown big brush pen, and I'm again adding a little bit of more depth of color to my words and just tapping that in and just smearing that with my finger. It's super easy. And finally I have the orange marker, and again I'm just going to go ahead and intensify some of the color that's already been painted and drawing that out, and the blending really becomes amazing. Super fun to do. So the next step is completely experimental for me. I'm trying this for the first time on camera, but I'm going to go ahead and take a little portion of my gelatos, and I have some new freezer paper, and so I've just kind of cut that with my little artist palette knife, and now I'm going to go ahead and chop this up a little bit. I'm going to be creating a background for my stamped and painted image, so I want to create something a little bit different, and I'm hoping it works. So what I want to do is just to get this into the smallest chunks that I can, and then I'll mix it with the Faber Castell glaze. Here I'm using the back side of my artist palette knife just to kind of smash the gelatos down a little bit. And so next I want to clean everything up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and grab some glaze. So I'm going to kind of scoop this together and make a little pile. And then I can scoop in some of the glaze, and it has a little protective sheet, so I'll go ahead and peel that back, and I'll be replacing that back when I'm done. I'm not exactly sure how much to add, so I'm just going to add a tip of my little palette thing here, and I'm going to go ahead and mix this in. And since the glaze is a liquid, you can see how the gelatos immediately turns into a paste, and a nice colored paste at that. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I mix this in really well. The one thing I know for sure that will happen is that the glaze and the gelatos will mix together, and the glaze will hold the color in. So I'll be able to add color on top of my project when I'm done, or once it's dry. So I'm going to make sure that I have this really, really well mixed in. I'll go ahead and scrape this off my palette knife back and forth and get ready to use my brayer. So I have my brayer here, and I also have some of the Tim Holtz watercolor paper, and I'm using the rough side of the watercolor paper, and I've just added some of that glaze solution to my brayer. I don't want to completely cover the paper. I want some white space, which will allow me to add other color on top. While I was off camera, I did do another sheet without cleaning my brayer, and I actually like this one better because I do have more space to add some color. So this is the part of the technique that can go really well or terribly wrong. So I'm just winging it here, and I'm just going to go ahead and use my finger and kind of blend in my gelato, and you can kind of see where it's starting to resist the color in between. But I'm going to go ahead and switch colors. I want to try some blues next time. So I have this nice open space. I'll go ahead and just start smushing that in, and I can see that it's resisting. So this is working out so far, but it does look kind of mucky right now. I've skipped ahead a little bit, and I've added more color, a little bit yellow and more brown and more blue, but here is where I'm hoping the magic will start. So I have a paintbrush, and I'm going to go ahead and spritz my entire panel with water, and I'm going to go ahead and just move that color around, and hopefully my gelatos that I've smushed into the paper will go ahead and really bleed into those white areas. The way I will be constructing my card, I won't be using the entire panel, so I'll be able to pick out a certain piece or a certain area of it to stick out onto my card. Okay, so once I have painted that, now I'll go ahead and dry that off and remove some of the excess paint, and you can see where it did resist, and I have a really nice distress look for this. So I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, and I'll use part of the centerpiece, I think, for the side of my card. So once everything was dry, I trimmed everything up and layered them together. And I allowed that blue area of my background distress piece really show up on the right side of my card. Really like how this turned out. So I hope you've enjoyed my card inspiration using Faber Castell products and showing you that experimenting can be fun. So thanks for watching.